So thank you very much. It's a real honour to be here speaking to you all today. And I should give that disclaimer, I'm probably the only politician at the conference. And it's been interesting at the different breakout sessions hearing some of your views on your national and local politicians. Not all of them have been favourable, funnily enough. Don't worry, your name's been marked. I will be feeding it back to your relevant countries. That's a joke. So what I wanted to come and speak to you today, so I'm the leader of the council. So internationally, the best sort of comparison is like a mayor, your regional mayors or city mayors. So I'm in charge of a £600 million organisation, nearly 700 million euros, 3,000 staff, and I represent a population of 260-odd thousand. So we're quite an important city in the UK. And as like I said, I am been the leader for 11 months. I'm coming up to my first year. We've got elections in 6 days' time to see whether we stay as the administration and I stay as the leader. So I've picked a really good time to sneak away for a few days and come and speak to you all. So it would be remiss of me not to talk about some of the UK national context. And being a British citizen standing in Paris talking to an international audience about Brexit was always going to be a tough sell. But I didn't want to talk too much about it. But what I think is important is just to mention how it has absolutely sucked all of the national government's thinking, resources, and everything. It's all focused on Brexit. Everything else is just put to the side. All the challenges that we've got as a country are just being completely marginalised because it's taken up all of our national collective bandwidth. It's a good job we've made such a success of it, isn't it? You're a very polite audience. If I gave that to residents, there would be uproar, clapping, shouting, screaming. We'd have the full range of emotions. So I won't talk about Brexit, but I think it's important that everyone looks to the national. Everyone says we need national government, we need national action. And yes, we do. But actually the real innovation and the real work is being done in the city regions and in the counties. And that, at the moment, in the UK, is where we need to look to solve some of these challenges. So the other thing I want to talk about, the national context. Now, this isn't a carbon reduction. It would be wonderful if it was. But this is actually the amount of money that national government gives to local government. Now, worldwide, we're seeing trends where powers and resources are being devolved down. In the UK, what we're seeing is responsibility being devolved down, but none of the money. In fact, it's worse than that because we're actually seeing the biggest reduction in government funding for local government, for cities and our towns across the country. We're seeing reductions of about 60p in every pound. We've lost about 60% nationally of our funding for our city regions. And that's leading to some huge, huge pressures. So we're looking at around 15 billion in this financial year. £15 billion, which is a huge chunk of money. So why is that a problem? Well, as councils, all our cost pressures are going up quite significantly. And you can see this is called the gap between this and this. We refer to as the jaws of doom in local government because our pressures are going up and our funding isn't keeping match for that. So we're solving all of the problems in our areas, working with health, fire, the police, and local government. Councils across the country are the glue that keeps public services together. And when that starts shrinking, as we are, you are seeing pressures happening. We're seeing crime going up. We're seeing the health service really struggling because the preventative work and the measures that councils like mine used to do, we're not doing anymore because we haven't got the funds to be able to do it. Here's just some of the services that my council provides. We own around 25% of all of the houses in Southampton. We run libraries, museums, we provide children's centres, and we do a range of different services. We collect people's waste. So we have a real responsibility to make sure that what we are doing is in a very sustainable way. So just as a council, my council's had to make £136 million worth of savings. They say it's savings. You don't get to keep it. It's a cut. So we've had £136 million cut from our budgets, and every year we have to cut more and more money from our budgets. So as soon as we've finished, because local government in the UK, you have to have a balanced budget. You can't borrow to fill your gap. You have to be balanced every year. So we're the most prudent of all government in the UK. No other public service has to set a balanced budget every year because they wouldn't be able to. The health service, education, they wouldn't be able to function if they had to be balanced. So as soon as you finish one budget round for 1 year, you set your budget. You then have to start the next year with your budget making more cuts. So that's where we've been. This is what we've got to come. So the fun really doesn't end. So we have to make sure that what we are doing as a council is absolutely vital for the city, for the growth, and for all of the kind of vulnerable citizens that we provide services for. So that's a little bit of a whistle-stop tour about the national context of where we find ourselves. And it's important because I think it really highlights our achievements in the field of environmental science and carbon reduction. So for those of you who don't know Southampton, we're an important city in the UK. As I said, we've got around 260,000 people. We're an important transport hub. We've got one of the largest ports in the UK, and we are the cruise ship capital as well. So we have over 500 odd cruise ships, the big ships. They're getting bigger and bigger, coming in to Southampton every year. And we're an important transport hub. We're only an hour and 10 from London, and we have most of our journeys, unfortunately, are by car. So we're looking about how we can green that. Looking forward, our population is going to increase. We need more homes. People want to live in the city centre. We've got more jobs, more people on our transport network, which is all going to lead to more issues that we need to solve. So our aspiration is to grow as a city. We've got a £3 billion master plan of investment. We're £2 billion towards that. And if you come to Southampton, if you haven't been recently, you really feel the city is moving, it's growing, it's developing. But how do we do that in a sustainable way? Well, we've been able to do that. And although we've grown, we've put thousands more homes in the city centre, thousands of more people are commuting in for jobs. We're seeing a reduction in the amount of people that are travelling in through a range of different projects that we're doing. It's dropped, the journeys have dropped by about 2%. Bus patronage is up by about 10%, and we are, outside of London, one of the best places to get a bus and one of the cheapest to get a bus. And that's been through working with this master plan in making sure that we design out the car and that we encourage that modal shift in transport. So the idea that you either have to grow without being sustainable is completely shot. And I think in Southampton we are demonstrating that you can grow in a very sustainable and environmental way. So I'll talk about some of the historic projects that we've got. We've got the Red Shed, which at a time was in the middle of an old industrial estate, which is now all being regenerated, and that's one of the biggest shopping districts, shopping centres in the UK. So the Red Shed is a geothermal plant, so we use the heat from the ground to fund the heat network. And some great foresight by previous leaders, council officers and the university, we've connected up all of the major city centre locations to our geothermal plant. It's also a district heating network, which we use combustion to do, which has saved thousands of tonnes of carbon since it was made in the 80s. So we've got Westquay, as I said, the biggest shopping district, our important IKEA, hotels, the Civic Centre, the hospital, and Solent University. And we hope to expand that network to make sure that they can take advantage of the low cost and low carbon heat and energy. Because we have a major reliance on the car, it's leading to air quality issues, and I think air quality has helped reinvigorate the environmental movement worldwide, but especially in the UK, because this isn't some abstract concept that we're going to be looking at in 10, 20 years where we see the effects of climate change. It's happening now, and you speak to residents, you say, you're breathing in this pollution now. And what I thought was really stark was when the mayor of Beijing said, my city isn't livable. For a politician to say that is pretty powerful, to say that my city isn't livable. Now, I'm not saying that about Southampton, because we've taken great strides to reduce air pollution. It's been a real focus of the City Council. We've had a huge amount of public interest, and we've built up that relationship. And this was one of the campaigning groups who put this up, which won't be going in any of our brochures selling the city, but nevertheless, it was a really good campaign to raise that awareness about air pollution issues. So in Southampton, you can see on the left, these are our what we call air quality management areas. So these are areas which have got highest levels of pollution. And on the right, you can see here where we've got asthma cases in the UK. So if you're a young person growing up in Southampton and you've got asthma, it's probably because of our air pollution. And we can see the correlation between the air quality management areas, so the highest areas of pollution, and the asthma instances on our maps. So there is a moral case to tackling air pollution, as well as the scientific and the health costs. So we were one of the top 5, or I should say the bottom 5, for air quality in the UK. And the World Health Organization released a report to say that these cities are exceeding 40 micrograms of nitrogen dioxide, and the European Union have said you need to be under that by 2020, otherwise we will fine the UK government. So let's just ignore Brexit for a minute. The government helpfully said to city council leaders like me, if you don't take action, we're going to pass those fines directly on to you. So that spurred us all to make sure that we were doing things. What I did point out to the Minister was, yes, we've got exceedances in the city boundary. You see these little red dots. The yellow dots are let, so you've got the legend there. But Minister, could you please tell me what you're doing about all of these red dots and purple dots outside the city boundary, which are the responsibility of the UK Government Highways Agency? They're yet to release their plans for what they're going to do for that. So we had a consultation about whether or not we have a charging zone, similar to what they have in London with their low emission zone. We had ultra low emission zone, I should say. They've got about 3 now. We had 10,000 responses, which is completely unprecedented, and it shows that the public were interested in taking action. The public wanted us to do something about it. Just to give you an idea, so we put out some really difficult budget proposals, and we usually get about 500 to 1,000 responses on those. And these are things that people really care about, that you're taking away from them. So the fact that we got over 10,000 on this issue, the largest conversation we've ever had with our residents, really does speak volumes. We've got a lot of media attention, there was a lot of political debate. So over the number of years since we started that conversation, we've done a number of different things. I won't talk to all of them, but one of the things that I think was really important was our work on buses. So we won money from the government to retrofit every single bus in our fleet to make sure that it was a Euro 6 standard. Most of practically all the buses in the UK are diesel, they are dirty, but Euro 6 is the best, cleanest buses that we can have that are diesel. We need to do electric. I think that's another partnership project we need to look at. But that retrofits. There's over 120 buses that are going to be now retrofitted, which meant that in some areas the pollution level would dropped by around 80% from buses alone. We also started a taxi scrappage scheme. Anyone who's ever done any work with the taxi trade know that they're a very difficult client group to keep on side. I'm being very diplomatic. And we had a scheme where they could take some money from the council, around £2,000, and they could use that towards an electric car. They could use that towards a hybrid car. We've got one of the green, now, because of this scheme, which has been running about 3 years, very low cost, around £250,000, the scheme, and we haven't actually given all the money out yet. But it's meant that around 30% of our taxi fleet is now either hybrid or electric. which is a real accomplishment again. We're also looking at further opportunities around HGVs, which I'll come to in just a minute. So because a number of those projects that I've just talked about, we managed, once we remodelled it recently, so when we had to submit the final business case to government about whether we needed a zone or we didn't need a zone, we could demonstrate that actually the little red dots we had 2-3 bits of exceedance, we were actually under the 40 microgram limit as set out by the European Union. So the government informally told us, well, we won't be funding a zone because they should be your last resort. So we then decided not to go ahead with the clean air zone because of the cost. And you talk about those financial pressures we had, the idea that we could spend at least minimum of £6 million on a zone without having the case would have been very difficult to do. But we weren't satisfied with that, and because we had all of that interest, we made sure that we had a range of different projects to take this forward. So we put a business case together for more measures from government of around £6 million. The government gave us 1.8 million of that, which is a shame, but we will look at doing all of these schemes and funding them through different routes. HGVs is an interesting one. So we have a freight consolidation warehouse where what we're trying to do is encourage all of the deliveries in Southampton to use that distribution centre. And it groups the deliveries together into trucks, into HGVs. So we've got one of the universities, Southampton University's halls of residence, has over 100 Amazon deliveries a day in light goods vehicles, which are very dirty, 100 just dropping off sometimes a little package, a little iPhone or headphones or whatever it is, even though they're really close to West Quay and could walk and pick it up. But we won't have a go at students. I think this might be the wrong audience. The consolidation is about reducing those journey times from those vehicles on the network and doing that. So we've got to try and encourage as much as we can. Working with the port, they recognise that they need to be part of the solution to climate change and air pollution. And they are going to be introducing a green levy on all HGVs that come in that don't meet certain Euro standards. This is the first time because our port has traditionally been quite remote and removed from being part of these issues, but they've really come to the table and to their credit. So they're going to have a green levy on the HGVs coming in. We're also making sure that we're amending all our city ordinances and powers to make sure that the taxis and the buses are Euro 6 at an absolute minimum, the cleanest diesel and petrol engines that we can get. And we've also got a huge package of measures that we're doing for electric vehicles. So we offer 90% discount on parking, free use of our toll bridges, and there's one other, I can't remember what it is, because there's so many projects that we've got, but we're really pushing electric vehicle ownership in Southampton. Oh, free charging, yeah, that's an important one. So free charging for all electric vehicles. About 3 years ago, we had no charging points at all. So by the end of this year, we'll have over 100 across the city, free at the point of use for all electric vehicle owners. But we needed to do more, because all of this stuff had happened beneath the surface. Not many people knew about it. There's probably some Southampton people in the audience that didn't know that we were doing all of this work. So what I wanted us to do is launch a charter for the city, which is a promise to residents. And the top thing in the charter is that we want to be carbon neutral by 2030. Everybody looks at local government, national government to lead the way. And this is what this charter will do. And this isn't just what the council will do. This is what the whole city needs to do. And we need to sign up as many organisations, businesses, residents and community groups to share these principles and have their own plans about how they can achieve these things. And so far, we have got the port companies, we've got the airport, we've got some of the biggest businesses signed up, ready to be founding signatures of the Green City Charter. And everything we do will be badged around the Green City, because Southampton is going to be one of those cities that you look to for low carbon, for clean air, for innovation in the UK. And we've got a fantastic partnership with Southampton University, well, both our universities, I should say, but Southampton University with their fantastic expertise in climate, and they're helping us with this charter and helping monitor those other companies, because it's really important that you don't just commit to something, but you actually have a plan to do something, and we'll be monitoring the progress that we've got against some of these goals. One of the things that's really important is that we have proper cycle highways, or these electric sort of scooters that you've seen in Paris, which are quite interesting. I haven't quite plucked up the courage to go on one yet, but dedicated highways for cycling. In Southampton, in the UK mainly, your cycling is on the road, and that puts a lot of people off. They say, I don't feel safe. Sometimes people just use that excuse because the first thing you ask them is, would you have a bike? And they say no. But what we're going to do is across the city, from every single point into the city centre and out, there will be dedicated cycling highways. So this is a 10-year plan to take up some of that road space, have those difficult conversations with residents, because everyone is wedded to their car. But we need to make sure the bus network, the cycling network, and importantly, the pavements, that's an important one, so that people can walk places, is fit for purpose. We've also set up our own energy company, Citizen Energy. And Citizen is what we call at the start a white label. So we've set up a retail arm of the energy, partnered up with Nottingham City Council, who've got an energy company. And what we're trying to do is encourage people to switch their energy provider. So in the UK, you can switch to loads of different companies. But 60% of people never switch. So they're usually paying way over the odds for their energy. So what we felt was we need to reach some of those goals, we need to be helping people, A, switch, but also if we're serious about generating energy, we need a vehicle to put some of that generation through. And that is what Citizen is aiming to do. All of the profits that we've got as a council will be reinvested back from Citizen, will be reinvested back into fuel poverty initiatives. So people who are really struggling to pay their energy bills or heat their homes, we're going to make sure that we can use that money to retrofit and to make sure that they can reduce their energy demand and their energy costs. It's also 100% renewable. So we use a process called RGOs, which is a wind turbine generates a certain amount of energy, and they provide the market with certificates. So we only use Citizen, and we buy those certificates to guarantee that what we are supplying to people is renewable. So I said, these are the phases. So we're around phase 2. So we would like to start that generation, and eventually we'll end up there with some of the future opportunities that we've got as a city. So that's where we are now, but where could we be in the future? So there's a range of different prompts here. So we've just started this construction. There's a company called Pivot Power who have put these nice shipping containers, which is quite apt for a maritime city, and these are full of batteries. So you've seen some of the different demand graphs. There was one yesterday in a presentation around 7 to 9 o'clock when people turn on the TVs and they make a cup of tea, energy spikes, but around 2 in the morning when we're all in bed mostly, the energy absolutely plummets. So what our battery storage will do is it will take from the grid in the low demand points and it will feed it back into the grid at the high demand points. So making a better use of the grid, making it more dynamic. We need to do more fast chargers. We need to explore hydrogen for some of the HGVs. Hydrogen's slowly taking off in the UK, not for the domestic car market, but for some of the bigger vehicles. Then that's something that we need to look at. And we need to we're going to look at a fast charging superstation up near the same place where we've got the battery storage so that we can meld the two. We've got a massive incinerator just across the water, where we're not capturing all of the heat that is generated. We could certainly look at different options there, how we can use that energy back into the local heat networks or feeding that back into the grid. I've just realised now that looks like a little upside down unhappy emoji face, doesn't it? What do we do about the cruise ships? Now, the cruise industry will say, well, cruise ships are getting greener and cleaner. Every new one that comes out, they're always bigger. So you go back 20 years, there are about 1,000 people going on. Now, the newer ships, you're looking, the next generation are about 5,000 people on each cruise ship. We've got about 523, don't quote me on the 23, coming into Southampton every year. All of the car journeys that are associated with those cruise ships coming in, all of those people. Now, we don't want to lose that part of our economy. And what these cruise ships do, I haven't got a video, but if you go on to Backer's tweets, I think he tweeted it, and he tweeted it at me as well, which is they keep their diesel engines running when they're at port. Diesel engines, and sometimes they're here for 2-3 days at a time, spewing out into the city centre, contributing to our air pollution problem. So what we're looking at, and we put the case to government, and unfortunately they didn't go through with it, is shore power, which is effectively, I haven't got a picture, but it's a bigger version of this, plugged on the shore side, plugging into the cruise ships so that they can be powered by the grid rather than by keeping their diesel engines running. Now that leads to so many more benefits, as you can imagine, and whilst they're powering all their entertainment and everything else, it'll be hopefully from more renewable sources than keeping your diesel engines going. We're looking at putting in some sea bins, so hopefully this will be a nice trial where we can put these around. So we've had a program called Blue Planet, where it's really raised the public's attention on plastic pollution in our seas. So we want to put a few of these around our waterways, up the Itchen River, and not near the cruise ships, but we can then pump in and collect some of the waste and rubbish that's going in to our sea. So we've worked in partnership with the university, and it's so important that you work and you bring all that expertise, and hearing some of the presentations and seeing some of your posters and everything. I don't understand a lot of it, but what is important is that you have those conversations with your local politicians and you drive that forward, because that partnership between universities and local government can really deliver some fantastic things for the city, and it's how we're going to utilise that expertise to address climate change. So one of the projects that we've been working in partnership is Solarising Southampton, and it's a complete analysis of where we could put solar voltaic panels across the city. So we have looked at all of the radiation aspects and where the best places are to put them. So we've got 2 of these tower blocks. There's 5 in total. There's only 2 in that picture. But for example, we've put solar on here. We've retrofitted those tower blocks. They're in my ward. And we've saved residents around £5 per week. Now, these are some of the poorest citizens that we've got in our city and in the southeast region of the UK. And now they are benefiting from lower energy costs, which they can then spend on other things. So it makes a real big difference, these projects. So as I said, we've mapped the entire region, and we can see here domestic buildings where we would get the best bang for our buck, and the commercial buildings where we'd also see the bigger the circle, the bigger the opportunity. And we can see here we've got one really good example, Wyndham Court, which is the building that we all love to hate in Southampton. It's a beautiful example of brutalist architecture, if you're interested in such a thing. I think we should knock it down. And we can see here, by putting on the capacity of Wyndham Court, we could generate nearly £15,500 per year and hugely reduce those residents' bills and feeding back the surplus energy into the grid. So I suppose what I really want to leave you with today is just that sense that in the UK, we have got some huge challenges in local government. We've got a population that's ageing. We have to look after children when their own families can't look after them. All of these cost pressures add up, and we are in the business of taking things away from people, which is always interesting as a politician to be. That's what my job is. But one of the things that we need to not lose sight of is climate change and addressing air pollution. And we've done all of this work despite national government, which we all look to deliver the answers. So what I would say to you is go back to your city regions, speak to your mayors, speak to your leaders, take some of this practice, this theory that you're talking about, and do that innovation, do those pilots, because that's the thing that's going to make the real big difference. we're up for that challenge as politicians. Let's have that dialogue. Let's work together, and let's deliver those big results for our communities. Thank you very much.
Any questions to Chris? Yeah, please go ahead, introduce yourself.
Patrick Leclerc from the German Aerospace Center. Thank you very much, very interesting. I have a question on your air pollution measurements. What's your confidence in terms of when and what is polluting so that you can target better the solutions afterwards?
I'm not a betting man, but I wouldn't put any money on it. It's something we need to be, so traditionally the way we've modelled things in the past is that we would take a long-term view, and we've got about 3 monitoring stations where that the council runs and owns, and we use that data. I don't know how reliable that data is, and it's very difficult to point to one project and say this has led to this reduction, which is what the public kind of expect. So we need to use that smart technology. People want to be able to log onto a website and see what the pollution is. And we've got something called the Air Alerts system, which is an email notification. And what we say to people who've got respiratory problems is we send them an email and say, pollution's bad today, you might not want to consider going outside. Now, that's not really good enough. We need to make sure that the data is robust enough, but I don't think we're quite there yet. But we need to look at, I think, working with the university in making sure we've got some of those dynamic sensors and some of that technology utilised.
Okay. Anybody else have a question? Please go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm from Korea Maritime and Ocean University. You mentioned about carbon neutral, and what do you mean by carbon neutral is the first question. And the old pier in Southampton have the facility to supply the shore power to the many cruisers at the present, not at the future.
Yeah.
Can you answer that?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. So I've been quite passionate about pushing shore power, but the pushback I get from the port and different energy providers, the grid can't handle it. So we need to, I say prove it. So they haven't been able to prove that it won't be able to handle it, but it is the default answer. So the current estimates is we could have one installation for shore power, so one cruise ship plugged in at a time. So we need to utilise different technology to expand that, because we could have 4 to 5 cruise ships in at any one point. Now, although the newer ships are green and they use LNG and some of them cut off their engines and use electric, we need to make sure that we can supply all of the cruise ships with that shore power. So we need to think about very interesting technological solutions to that. I think battery storage is one of them, but there needs to be others, and we need to have a better grid to handle it.
Okay, any more questions? Please go ahead. Introduce yourself. Use the microphone. Please do use the microphone. Thank you.
Okay, it's working.
That's better. I can hear you.
Perfect. So I am Claude Waknin from Israel. And I wonder to what kind of market you will address with those developments, which are very interesting. But I wonder is if what happens in Southampton with some buildings really worry people that really need electricity.
Mm. So, I mean, I think that your questions were connected, because I didn't address your, what do you mean by carbon neutral? That's a typical political deflection, that was. But for us as a council, for me, carbon neutrality is about making sure that all of the buildings, all of the transport that we have is carbon neutral. So that's the starting point. We're not saying to people that you can't use energy. It's about making sure that they're using less energy and they're not wasting energy. So, for example, in those tower blocks that I mentioned earlier, the heating of those tower blocks was always on. That's incredibly wasteful. So people couldn't regulate their own heat. And there's an interesting discussion from one of the lecturers about making sure that different people from different areas have different tolerances to heat. So what you would do is, when you would go and speak to some of these residents, the heat would be coming out on a hot day because they were just or put it on for the whole building. So that's wasteful, isn't it? That's in no one's interest to keep that kind of thing working. But what we're doing around the carbon neutrality side of it, we've already shown that we can do it. So we've reduced, by the end of this year, we're modelling that we've reduced air pollution in some of the polluted areas by 24%. Over the last 8 years, we've reduced carbon emitted as a council by over 20,000 tonnes, about 55%. So we've got a good record of delivery and doing it in a way that doesn't put people against us, but brings people with us. And I think that's important for all of us. People want the convenience. Yes, they want to be green, but they don't want their lifestyles to change too much, which means that we have to be very clever about how we engage with people and bring them with us and not against us.